Ignorance was widespread. People had to hate. And they elicited university students, they elicited high school students. Hi everyone, Nadine Mulwood. We've had some people, I wouldn't say challenge me a little bit on some of the ideas around communism and the fact that Canada is becoming more and more socialist, which does lead to communism. If you take a look historically at Germany, China, even Russia, they didn't come out calling themselves communists. They came out calling themselves socialists. And I found it interesting today, and I thought I'd share a few minutes about communism, some of the books I've been reading, and the information, and why I feel we are on this trajectory. And so what sparked this originally was from the Epoch Times, actually, September 10th to 16th paper. There's a great little, it's not so little actually, it's quite long, article in here that talks about the Chinese Communist Party goals, ambitions. And one of the things they talk about here is the Chinese Communist Party and the ideology runs on hatred. And I have read numerous books. One of the best ones is by Frank Decoder, and it's called The Tragedy of Liberation. He's written a few others as well. Hi, lie down. Excuse me, just one moment. We'll remove you. But it's Mao's Great Famine and the Cultural Revolution. And all of them, to sum it up, is core to note that this is how they gain control, this is how they keep control, and it is an ideology of hatred. And I'm going to read some excerpts, he's back again, excerpts from the book here that talks about people's personal experiences and actual history. And it's hard to get information out of China because, of course, you know, the party itself is quite guarded about releasing information and documents. But here's the Chinese Communist Party's goal ambitions, according to the Epoch Times. It's an opinion piece, B7. I just highlighted a few parts. The Chinese Communist Party's ideology runs on hatred. It promotes hatred for Japan, Taiwan, Tibet, ethnic minorities, religious believers, dissidents, and of course, most importantly, the United States of America. Before the Chinese communists seized power, they repeatedly praised the United States for its friendship with China. And of course, however, as soon as the CCP regime was set up, it immediately took advantage and then started its party of hatred, not only about the US, but also other foreign nationals. But interestingly enough, the United States and other foreign nationals, as they were being kicked out or expelled or forced to leave almost out of China, it was Russians that moved into those positions, because what people don't always know and understand is that Mao and the Liberation Army was actually funded by Russia. And many of the policies, obviously, that China has adopted are directly out of Russia. In fact, the CPC does not care about whether Chinese people live or die, nor does it care about Chinese territorial integrity or sustainable long-term development. The true evilness of how the CCP has persecuted its own people, and don't kid yourself, communism has been responsible for almost, if not more, that we're aware of, more than 100 million deaths. A country that persecutes, tortures its own people, kills its own people. I don't think in any way, shape, or form that's an ideology or a government, form of government that deserves any praise or recognition. I can't even believe that we have to have this discussion today. But one of the reasons we have to have this discussion today is because nobody else is talking about it. Look at our education system. People are being taught in the United States and Canada that capitalism is evil. Look at all the harms that have come, the inequality. And yet, under capitalism, we in North America have achieved some of the highest standard of living. Our poorest of people are wealthier than, I'd say, 70% of the world's population. So the fact that we are not teaching our own children about these dangerous ideologies like socialism and communism, and then we're promoting the idea that things like capitalism, the reason we have the freedoms that we have today, is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. So back to the article. Fourth, to use hatred to create psychological preparedness needed for future wars. First, to paint itself as a savior of the Chinese people, to legitimize its brutal rule. This is the one thing that amazes me. The excuses we hear for bad behavior, to justify bad behavior. Black lives matter. Don't all lives matter? But under the Black Lives Matter, oh, we can take that because we need it more. Stealing is stealing. Damaging property is damaging property. These excuses for just bad behavior just blow my mind. You know the difference between right and wrong. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to blur the differences between right and wrong. But you know right and wrong. We all know right and wrong. And if you don't, well, you know, there's a few books out there that could teach you the difference between right and wrong at the simplest of terms. And we can use do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I don't want people breaking my property, stealing my things, so maybe I probably shouldn't do that to others. Oh, and then, but people would say, but Nadine, you're white privilege. No. Anyway, the CCP has indoctrinated the younger generation with hatred. Not seeing that today in the United States, are we? No, not at all. And if you think that it's this is the epoch times and they're making this stuff up, Frank DeCotter actually did a really good job at, and it's throughout his books. Ignorance was widespread. People had to hate. And they elicited university students. They elicited high school students. Greta, no, did I say that out loud? Sorry. You know, but they were, you know, the fiction was for in these times that, you know, it was voluntary. In many cases it wasn't, but school children were enrolled in campaigns and they were being taught and prepared, as it says here, you know, for future wars. They would sacrifice themselves if need be, participate in all-out armed conflict. We saw this in Nazi Germany. Brown shirts. What's going on today is not new. People seem to think that everything is new and this has never happened before. It has happened before. This is right out of the textbook. It's right out of Marx. You know, the Communist Manifesto, confiscation of the property, abolition of rights of inheritance, private property. We don't have private property in Canada, at least in the United States, thank goodness. They do have the right to private property. One of the ones, free education for all children in government schools. How best to start brainwashing and indoctrinating your children with these idealistic ideals and what it is that they hope to accomplish, but to get your children young. All of these things, people think, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. It's not conspiracy, it's fact. Read a little bit. Go back, look through history. Here we talk about, China right now today, and one of the ways that it's looking to control and spread its influence around the world is the One Belt, One Road initiative. And one of the things here I want to point out is that they are investing trillions of dollars in countries. Some of them have countries, some of them have not countries. The ones that don't have much, they basically come in, they build, and then they force these countries, or the countries voluntarily say, fine, we'll take it, but they have to give up control of these ports, this critical infrastructure. The countries that don't necessarily require, all the dollars and are more have countries, well, they do joint ventures. But oftentimes what happens, you'll see a lot of these countries can't afford to maintain, keep, so then China takes them over. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a really good example of this, because the CCP, Communist Party, gained the right to operate their port, which is a very strategic port because it moves 40% of the world's crude oil. Not strategic at all there. And if you think that we're not subject to that in Canada, let's take a look at what's been going on with healthcare. And we're still buying and working with China as it relates to health around this COVID-19. Have we not learned anything? Especially at this particular time. We probably shouldn't be trusting anything that's coming out of China. But yet our National Research Center actually has been working with China, and money has been flowing. So again, the Communist Party using debt traps to gain control of strategic locations. Sri Lanka could not pay its debt to Chinese companies, so in 2017, what did it do? It signed over the use of the Hambantota port to Chinese company for 99 years. Yeah. And if you think that it's not happening in the U.S. as well, there was They bought, the China Merchants Port Holdings bought 49% equity of the Terminal Link SAS in France, and also obtained and through that, it obtained the rights of 15 terminals in 8 countries, 2 of which are in the United States, one in Miami, Florida, and another one in Texas. So people look at the amount of debt and deficit spending that's going on in Canada, and I'm going, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to intentionally bankrupt the country? Perhaps, because the United Nations is 193 countries, the majority of which are not free and democratic societies. And we saw that in the treatment of Hong Kong. And you can see how deep the Chinese have infiltrated many of these other countries in the vote on the treatment around Hong Kong. Only 35 countries stood up to defend freedom and democracy in Hong Kong. Okay, that's scary. That's scary. So they're teaching this ideology of hate. I'm going to read just a few little quick things out of the book that kind of actually go hand in hand with what's going on and what's being stated in this article, because people just don't believe it. And one of the best quotes that I come back to in this one here, it's actually page 131, The Tragedy of Liberation, Frank Decatur. And Peng Duhua was quoted as having said, "The tiger always eats people. And the time when it wants to eat people depends on its appetite. It is impossible to make any concessions to a tiger." And how many times have you heard China referenced as a tiger, the Asian tiger? A couple of other little things, one of the interesting ones I wanted to talk to you here about was, and this has been done in this book and it documents it really quite well, was germ warfare. People lived in terror of an invisible enemy seemingly lurking in almost every kind of organic matter. Children were locked up inside their homes for fear of contamination. Entire villages shut down. This was carried out like a military campaign and soon alienated large sections of the population. Those who won't wear masks, those who will wear masks, those who won't get vaccinated, those who... Just saying. Whether or not they wanted to, they were vaccinated, locking villagers up in their homes until they had been injected. Is this what we're headed for? It's not out of the question. Cities were turned into stark concrete landscapes devoid of greenery because, of course, nature is your enemy, unfortunately. And they started wearing cotton masks, which always surprised foreign visitors. And here we are wearing cotton masks. Everybody should be wearing a mask. And the commentary was this habit lasted for decades. So they are conditioning us to wear masks, and this habit will most likely go on for decades. And what are they instilling upon us? Fear. Fear of natural occurrences, natural events, COVID-19. Many people turned to the black market, Ministry of Health, set up. And what was really interesting about this whole campaign, because this is what it was a campaign, was that it had been based on coercion and had proved wasteful. So in the end, this literally was exposed as a fraud committed upon its own people. I'm not saying that COVID-19 is a fraud. I believe the virus is indeed real, but I think much around what is happening today is over-exaggerated, and I think there is some public and political agendas that are happening. I don't have much more time today to go into anything, but it does go on here to talk about communism and its impact on private industry and the destruction of the small business owner and capitalism and capitalists. And what's fascinating is, as quickly as this goes downhill, we need to start looking, because this is very likely the path that we are being led. And if we don't start understanding what's going on and start fighting for our freedoms and our rights and start questioning, and I'm not about anti-anything, I'm just about ask the questions. If the government is going to use force, because government is force, the government is going to use force on the people for any reason, there should be a very, very, very solid justification for doing so. And as we can see in pretty much any regime that has adopted communism, whether it was China, whether it was Russia, Cambodia, pick one, it always ends in death, destruction, and despair. Nothing good has ever come from it. Hundreds of millions of people have died at the hands of communism. So don't tell me that it's been implemented wrong. It's been implemented many, many times. How many times do you have to do the same experiment to realize that it doesn't give you the result you're looking for? So, little bit of information. I hope this helps. I hope some of you will actually take the time to go and do a little history lesson on your own. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. If you like the video, please do click the like, share. I do believe we have a Patreon account now, so you can always subscribe to that. And until next time, keep smiling. Don't lose hope.